All right, what you're looking at here are the three types of air filters that are available to consumers on the market. We'll start with your paper-based one. This is your standard air filter that comes stock in a vehicle. You also have foam type air filters and you have cloth type air filters. This air filter, the cloth air filter and the foam air filter, both get coated with oil to assist the filtering process. Because this and this don't block particulates. They don't block dust as well. However, oil attracts dust really well. So by coating these in oil, the theory is they flow at a higher rate, which means more air goes through them, but they still catch the same amount of particles. What I want to point out to you about these, we're going to talk about which one's better. I'll use a feather duster to do kind of an unscientific demonstration of how they flow. So the first one I want to talk about is your foam air filter. As you can see, this one's out of a lawnmower. It's super dirty and dusty, but I'm going to use it to illustrate a very important point about why you shouldn't use a foam air filter if at all possible. I mean, if your lawnmower, that's all they make for lawnmowers for the most part, so, go ahead. But I wouldn't put one in your car. Here's why. Your air filter is supposed to stop stuff from getting into your engine. It filters gunk out, which is why this thing is filthy. You can see how absolutely dirty this thing is. Here's the bad news. When foam filters get old, they start to degrade, which means fall apart. See all this stuff that kind of starting to crack and look like it wants to fall apart? The older these get, the more they like to fall apart. See all the stuff that's falling off of it, all these little foam particles and junk that's falling off of it? There's all this foam. I'm just shaking it. Look at all the stuff that's falling off of it. Okay? That's a little bits of dust, but it's also little particles of foam. So what can happen with these is they can disintegrate and get sucked into your air intake, which is very bad. I would not use a foam filter on a vehicle of any type. Use a paper filter or use your cloth filter. Do not use a foam filter. All right, because you don't want pieces of foam getting sucked into your engine. So that's foam based. Don't use them. Okay, paper and cloth. Well, why use a paper filter? Why use a cloth filter? What's the difference? What makes a filter good? Well, first off, let's go with why use a paper versus a cloth filter, or vice versa. This one is supposed to catch more particles. This is why they come stock in your vehicle. This is your safe bet. K&N, which is what this is, your cloth air filter, puts a lot of research, R&D, a lot of research money into their filters. And from what I've seen, they are well made and they get the job done as long as they are properly maintained and they don't dry out, meaning they always have oil on them. I think that's the trick with these. If you don't properly maintain them, they can become a liability. If you do properly maintain them, I think they can be an effective way to increase horsepower and gas mileage in a vehicle by helping it breathe a little bit better. Again, I would use a drop-in filter as opposed to like a pod filter or one of this type of filter. Now, of course, if you're dealing with, like, this came off an old Volkswagen or motorcycle, maybe you're kind of limited in your choices, in which case you use what you can. But I think the drop-in air filter that keeps the stock air box is the best. Stock air boxes do a lot of smoothing to the air because air is technically a fluid, and the less rough, the smoother that the airflow is, the easier it is for the engine to, especially things like constant velocity carbs and things like that, to basically to use the air. It's good for it to have a little bit of swirl, so you'll have things in old Japanese motorcycles and cars that inject a little bit of air to give the air-fuel mixture like an additional swirl. You'll hear things like air jet and things like that. So it's good to have motion in your air-fuel mix. It's just not good to have really turbulent air coming into your engine. So that being said, what makes a good air filter? Well, what makes a good air filter is its surface area. It's all about surface area, just like so many things in automotive. When you're talking about valves, the more surface area you have for your valves, the better, which is why it's better to have 4 valve configurations than 2 valves, and I can show you the math on that later. With these, it's about the pleats. So the more pleats you have, the more surface area you have. Now these are out of 2 different vehicles, so they're not the same size. Now let's pretend these are the same size. Therefore we'd be comparing apples to apples. They have the same depth and so forth and so on. When you're dealing with pleats, if they're exact same size, the one with more pleats has more surface area, because each one of these pleats, every time it goes down and comes back up, that's surface area. So basically, you go down, here, we'll do it in millimeters. So this goes down to about 3 centimeters, and it's about 20 centimeters long. So that gives you a total surface area on one side of this of 60 centimeters squared. So each side of this is 60 and 60 for a total of 120 centimeters squared. Now that's great, but there's only 15 of these little pleats. This K&N air filter has 36 pleats. This is a cheaper air filter. It is easier to manufacture an air filter with big fat cleats like this than it is to manufacture an air filter with skinnier pleats. Just because anytime something gets smaller and it's being machine made, it has to be more precise, and anytime something has to be more precise, it's slightly more difficult to make. Therefore, this is an easier one to manufacture. It is cheaper, but if this were the same size as this, if we had 2 that were the exact same size, I don't, because I don't have a K&N air filter for this exact same car, but if they're the exact same size, then the surface area on this one would be greater, because you simply have more of those pleats to give you surface area. So you'd have, instead of having 3 by 20 by 15, you'd have 3 by 20 by 36, which is what you have on the K&N. So it's all about surface area, guys. So the more pleats, the better, because the more surface area you have for letting air into your engine. Now, let me illustrate the airflow using this feather duster and my air compressor. So we'll use the paper air filter first to show you the difference in flow here. I got my air filter here. I got my pressure set at 60 psi. Check this out. See how much I've got this directly behind the air filter, and you can see how much or how little the feather duster gets moved. Now let's do the same thing with the K&N. Now, are we getting a ton more movement? No. But is it moving more? Yes, it is moving more. At least I could see it on my end moving more. I hope you could see it on the video. So this cloth impregnated with oil is your best bet. For high flow purposes, it's a good compromise between safety that you need, making sure stuff doesn't get sucked in your engine, and performance. Paper air filters are great if you're not worried about performance. They're also your safest bet because they stop the most amount of particles. And remember, guys, it's all about the surface area. It's all about the pleats. So the more pleats you have, the more surface area you have, and therefore the more air you have coming into the engine. Second thing that affects it is the actual substance it's made out of itself. So it's a combination of your overall surface area and the material that the air filter is made out of. So I hope that clears up some of the mystery around this. So to summarize, foam air filters, very, very bad. Don't use them if you can avoid it. Paper air filters, perfectly fine. Don't flow super well, but do stop the majority of the particles you don't want entering your engine. Cloth air filters are great. They flow more than a standard paper air filter, but you have to make sure you keep them covered in oil. Otherwise, you will run into issues with this stuff letting dust and particles into your engine. And remember, the more pleats you have on an air filter, the more surface area you have and the more air you have getting into your engine. So it's a combination of the number of pleats and the material that the air filter is made out of that make it effective in allowing for more flow. All right, that's it.